Hello and welcome to Now Spinning Magazine. And this is the podcast with me, Phil Aston. And on this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to have with me legendary drummer Chester Thompson. Now, Chester's played with Weather Report, Frank Zappa, Genesis, Steve Hackett, Santana, Phil Collins, anyone you can think of. And also, Chester comes from the era of drummers like Billy Cobham, Alphonse Mouzon, Lenny White, Tony Williams, the jazz greats. And wow. Chester has got a brand new album out called Wake Up Call, which I've been listening to for the last few days, and I absolutely love it. So welcome, Chester. And
thank you very much.
How are you doing?
I'm good, Phil. How are you, man?
I'm fine, thank you. Now, this new album...
I got to say, I'm loving this wall behind you, all the vinyl and the CD. You know, oh man, it's I could get lost in your room. I see a little black market and Seconds Out down there. Yeah,
yeah. Well, I'm going to touch on those a bit later on because they are two of my favorite records, and the fact that I'm able to talk to you is such a great honor, and it's wonderful, as I say, to be talking to you. But this new album, which correct me if I'm wrong, the kind of seeds were sown during the lockdown, weren't they?
Yeah, it was totally done during the lockdown. I've never done anything quite like it, but it turned out to be a lot of fun. Kept me sane during the lockdown, actually. You know.
So because the album was recorded kind of remotely, with you sending the drum tracks over to your collaborators on bass and keyboards. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, they were my first band. You know, we had a band in the 80s, sort of 82, 83, around that. And we sort of did things between Genesis and field tours, which meant we didn't have a lot of time together. But when the band was formed, we started as a bunch of friends just jamming together, which led to writing, which led to forming a proper band and doing gigs. And then suddenly it was time for me to go again. So unfortunately, I was gone. I don't remember which tour it was, but I was gone most of that year. And so by the time I got back, they had obviously had to find other things to do. But we've always been really dear friends and have stayed in touch. So at the start of COVID, it was just sort of checking in, how you doing, all that, which led to me sending them a drum track, which I thought they were just going to jam along with, something to do other than a drum machine. But they wrote these crazy melodies and parts around it and sent it back to me. I was stunned. I was just absolutely loving what they did. They knew me, well, they still know me very well musically, maybe more than anybody else. And when I asked them, how did you come up with this? Their response was, well, you led it. We just went where you led. And it was like, which was very flattering, but it still freaked me out. And that would have been track 3 on the album, Hide and Seek.
Which is actually one of my favorites.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
great.
I'll come to this later, but that is one of my favorites because that's it. Is it Robert Hill on bass? Is that?
Yeah, well, we call him Pee Wee, but of course he's the requisite 6'4" to be called Pee Wee, right? But I guess his family, everybody had nicknames, you know.
Because his playing just locks in with you so well. I love that kind of slap bass. Really, it's just such a groove, isn't it? That particular track is so joyous and so uplifting.
Oh, great. Thank you. And so the second one was track number 2, right? So which is, so that's the, well, like I say, after the first one, I thought, well, let me send you another one. But I thought, let's do something completely different. So I set down a bit of a 6/8 groove and sent that. And boy, what Michiko came up with, his wife, I was really blown away on that one. And it took the better part of a year, probably spilled into the next year, actually, because as things started to open up a bit, they started getting busy and I started having a few things to do as well. And so we just kept at it until we had it completed. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, we have a whole album here. Let's do something, you know. And thanks to Mark Monforti over at Prog Rock Essentials, because I ended up going out with Unitopia, which was a really fun project as well. Mm-hmm. And he heard it and thought, man, we'd really like to have this available on tour as merch and I'd like to put it out on the album that the group is on. So on the label rather. And yeah, that's how it came about.
If I got this right, you sent over like your drum track
Yeah,
as it
nothing but
nothing
they.
but the drum track.
Well, there were a couple other songs where I did send a melody that I
Ah,
was hearing,
right.
and she developed those and harmonized them and all of that. But most of it, I'd say 80% of it is just me sending over just a drum track. When I play alone, um, I don't think of myself as much of a soloist. I mean, I've had to do it a million times over the years, but whenever I do play alone drums, I'm hearing melodies in my head. I'm not really thinking drums. Tend to think a bit more melodically. And so when I would sit and do these things, I wasn't trying to pre-plan a tune. I really just let it flow. I just went with it. But I guess after so many years, you'd sort of instinctively hear things, and so I would just go ahead and just put in the fills and wherever I felt they should go, and lo and behold, they wrote amazing things around it. Yeah.
Do you think that because you're from your background is jazz, and in many ways that kind of unlike sort of like straight ahead rock drumming, jazz
Mm-hmm.
drumming is more lyrical. There's more melody
Yeah,
in the playing, isn't there?
I'd agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think because my very first drum set lessons were with a friend of one of my brothers who had chosen to play jazz when I was growing up with soul music. Okay, so it was like the early Motown, early James Brown. Those were the cover songs we played, which was a very great foundation to have, by the
Yeah,
way.
it certainly is.
But the very first drum set lessons, it was all dealing with jazz. He would teach me he'd put on a record and teach me how to play along with it. Accent the cymbal here a bit when you do it, and taught me how to trade solos, count fours as we called it, trade 4-bar solos. He taught me a very valuable thing, which was make sure, when you want to play along with this thing, listen a few times and learn the melody. So while it's going on, like keep the melody in your head and you'll hear where the solos are going. You won't get lost and confused when they're soloing, which was a very valuable lesson. And it did probably start me thinking more melodically and being tuned into melodies in that.
And also, your son, he plays guitar on the album, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
He's on 3 of the tracks. Yeah,
he's a absolutely superb player. He's
yeah
on the opening track, isn't he? Wake Up Call.
yes, that's him. He's also a superb keyboard, bass, and drummer.
Oh, right, okay.
So he plays them all equally as well, which is, had I had to be in school with him, I probably would have been very jealous of him, actually. But yeah, and
sorry,
we had
carry on.
the other guitar players were part of that band that we had originally. Caleb Quaid, which you may know his name from the early Elton days.
Yeah,
and a guitarist named Ronnie Van, who did quite a lot of Motown work and session work and stuff. And the saxophone player who was in that band originally for some health issues wasn't available, but there's a wonderful saxophonist here in Nashville, Jeff Coffin, who plays in Dave Matthews Band. He was gracious to do some stuff for me, and a young lady named Sheila Gonzalez who plays in Dweezil Zappa's band.
wow.
She was a friend of Pee Wee and Michiko, and she offered. They asked her about adding some horns on the sort of bluesy one. And the guy who mixed the tracks, who was actually because we all sent in our tracks, and he actually did the mix. A guy named Brendan Harkin. He actually played guitar on Smack 'Em, which is the sort of drum solos in that.
Yes, Smack'em's another one of my favorite tracks. Actually, that's as you say, that's got some stunning bass and drums interplay, isn't it? It really got such a great groove. So with that one, when you send that one over, was there an idea that what you were playing there would be like a little spotlight on your playing?
Yeah, they had been really pushing me. It's like, man, there's no drum solos on here. It's like, well, I'm not trying to, make a drum record. I just,
Yeah.
And they said, no, you got to play some solos, man. So with that one, yeah, I did kind of have in mind to just have some sections where I'd just go for it, not having any idea what they would put around it. Again. But yeah, that one I did intend to go for it a bit, yeah.
So you were all doing this remotely? Was anybody together? I mean, was your son with you when he did the guitar parts or
No,
anything? No,
not at all. Not
no
at
one at
all.
all.
Only Pee Wee and Michio were together in their studio in L.A.
Wow.
But everybody else's parts happened remotely. And then I used a really, really wonderful percussionist, a guy named Walter Rodriguez, who was with them out there, but has since moved to Nashville. So it's like, yeah, we haven't actually played together again, but we do get together sometimes, and I've gotten to know him. Wonderful player.
Yeah, because I think it's amazing. It's one of the, I guess, it's one of the positives in the way that technology has changed the way music is
Yes,
produced
yes,
and listened to, is the fact that musicians can literally create wonderful music like you have without actually getting on an aeroplane or going to stay in expensive hotels, why they do
that's
this,
true. That's true.
you know.
Yeah, that part. Yeah, that is the great thing about the technology. There's some other things that are maybe not so great about it, but at the same time, it was wonderful to be able to do that, and and really, there's even technology now which I didn't use any of it, but there's actually technology where you can do that live now, from different countries and whatever.
Yeah.
My room, I tend to. My computer is running on Wi-Fi, but so you'd have to be plugged in directly to the source.
Yeah. Ethernet cable.
So
Yeah.
if people on each end are plugged in directly, not Wi-Fi, they can actually play in real time and hear each other in real time.
Wow.
I don't know if you can play together. I think it's more a thing where the producer could hear it in real time and make his notes immediately. I don't know. I think there'd still be a bit of a time lag if you were trying to play together. I'm not sure how that would work, but
yeah. Because again, just before we leave this part, again, it's fascinating to me because I'm so used to talking to people, or even myself, because I play guitar, that you
maybe
write the
you'll be on the
melody.
next.
Thank you. That you write the melody on the guitar, and then you imagine the bass and drums coming on. They listen and they whatever. But for you to send over just the bare drum track, how then the musicians connected to that and created a piece of music. It is amazing. And I think that's what I want everyone to kind of really think about that. This is from a drum track, and then melodies are formed from that literally pure drums. Because when you were playing it down, you weren't thinking, oh, this will probably be one of the key melodies in the song here, or this will be, you didn't know that was going to happen.
Exactly. Yes. Well, I've studied a bit over the years, and one of my favorite classes was a composition class when I was living in LA, and the teacher would always insist. He says his thing was that rhythm dictates melody, melody dictates harmony. So even when I write myself, I start with I'll either lay down a drum track or I'll program something just as a starting point, because each rhythm is going to inspire a different melody. If I played a rhythm like that's going to be a very different melody than if I'm playing. Okay, so from that perspective, it totally made sense to me to do it that way.
Very interesting. Were you very much kind of aware or influenced by the people like Billy Cobham and Alphonse Mouzon and all these people?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Billy Cobham especially. I mean, I think that whole generation, all of us were influenced definitely by. Well, he prefers Bill Cobham, but marketing just insists on calling him Billy. But but yeah, it's he was a major influence. In fact, the first time I heard Mahavishnu, it totally wrecked me. It was like, what in the world, But we've gotten to be friends over the years, and really nice guy actually. I mean, it's frightening because he's pretty modest about his playing, but when he sits down, it's like, oh my goodness. But yeah, the early influences were Art Blakey. Max Roach was the very first influence. He's probably the first one I heard and tried to make a feeble attempt to play like. But yeah, Billy would have been one of the later influences with the contemporary stuff of the time, because traditional jazz would have been Oh, Max Roach, Art Blakey, Elvin Jones, which had this amazing rhythmic thing that he did, which that changed everything for me. It brought it made me realize you don't have to play it like everybody else, you know. So yeah, those were the main things. But as far as contemporary drummers, Billy would have been the biggest influence. Yeah,
and especially I guess with albums like Spectrum, which kind of
exactly. Yeah,
changed so many things really. Especially as you say that your record label has got the word progressive in it. You were kind of the kind of jazz fusion, jazz rock era was very, to my ears, aligned to progressive rock. It was complex.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas
But
people tend to see it as different things, but it was very similar, wasn't it, in some ways?
So when they were asking, well, what style of music is this? I mean, I really honestly feel like it should be called prog funk or progressive funk, because there's like the feel of it is very important for us, and that's what we do. But it's not your typical sort of song structure by any means. I thought the songs were a bit more adventurous than the stuff you would typically call funk. So what I wanted to have it listed as, which doesn't seem to exist yet, is that category of prog funk, because there are other things that would fit that as well, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because that's where I guess Billy Cobham went later in his career, wasn't it? He went more funky.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the same old groove forever and ever, and you know. I mean, and then when the jazz fusion thing started, fortunately, got in pretty early in that world. I guess that's pretty much what I grew up with, actually, because of the jazz influences and playing it early, but growing up playing the soul music as well. Yeah, it's kind of it's this blend, because, like, say, Herbie Hancock, some of the things he did, you'd have these incredible solos and chord structures and stuff, but the grooves were just amazing, you know, just these really solid, funky grooves, you know.
So your time in Frank Zappa must have been an incredibly education, because that music is also, when you take the lift up the bonnet, is jazz orientated,
yes.
Isn't it?
Best school I ever went to. That's the way I look at it. I mean, man, the education I got playing with that guy was amazing, man. Yeah, yeah, I mean, can't say enough great stuff about him. And he was certainly quirky, obviously, as we all know. But when it came to putting his music together, man, the guy was. It was my first introduction to 40-hour-a-week rehearsals, you know.
Wow.
And you know, we had 1 hour for lunch and no time wasted. I mean, we would work, you know, so 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And you came out of it able to do things. I came out of it able to do things I never imagined I'd be able to do, because, I mean, I think everybody in that band, maybe even including George Duke, we were challenged at some point. You'd be challenged with something where I've got to go practice this. I've not had to do this before. And the unspoken rule of the band was that it's okay if you can't play it the first day, but nobody couldn't play it the next day. It was didn't get a lot of sleep that first month, that's for sure.
Wow.
But that discipline, that learning to play things and break down things the way he did it, it's definitely stuck with me and carried through. So between him and I think my other really major influence of people I've worked with would have been Joe Zawinul with the Weather Report.
Yeah.
Because he grew up in Vienna with all the classical music, but he got into jazz at a very early age. And but his own music, it's almost like a folk music, but you can't really determine exactly from which country or which culture. And that really sticks out to me as well. You know, heavy on the rhythms, but in some cases very, very sophisticated harmonies as well. But that blend of that, you know, I guess being in Weather Report and Zappa, that I think those two bands have really been the major influences in my own, you know, what I want to do, you know.
I mean, there's some superb records like Bongo Fury, isn't there? And obviously from the Zappa, there's so many. But obviously Black Market by Weather Report is one of my favorite albums by them, and specifically the track Gibraltar, which is on there, which is just wonderful. What I mean, you were only there for that one album, but they obviously really.
Well, I had toured for a year prior to that album.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, the band was very tight by then, yes.
So do you have very fond memories of that time? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My favorite, the last tour I did with him, which is where Phil came to one of the concerts and heard me play live. The last tour I ended up doing, we toured Europe, and we did it all on trains, no flights. We did the whole tour, and oh man, it was magical. It was really, really amazing, you know. So we had the first class compartment with the little table and the three seats facing each other, just like the movies, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so the conversations and the music, and you know, it was a pretty magical time for me. Yeah.
Well, the next thing I've really, this is a great honor to be able to ask you this question because you've gone through like Frank Zappa, you've listened to all this jazz and obviously Weather Report, and then Phil Collins has seen you in Weather Report, and he's now come from behind the drum stall to become the singer in Genesis, and he asks you to help out for Genesis Live. Now, Genesis were at this time were having like pop singles in the charts. Their music
No,
was
not when I started.
oh
No,
no,
when I
oh
started,
really?
it was all prog. When I
Oh
started, it was
right,
all prog.
because I
I
just
think if there was a single, it might have been "I Know What I Like" and
yeah,
maybe "Carpet Crawl," but
yeah.
everything else was all prog.
Oh
That
right,
was my
okay.
first introduction to that world of prog.
So
And
so was it an easy? You didn't have to culturally think differently. You just
oh,
blended
absolutely,
straight
I
in.
did.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely did. That was the biggest cultural adjustment I'd ever had to make because the music. Okay, I look at it as before drum machines. Okay, every country, every local band had its own identity.
Mm-hmm.
I think when the drum machine came along, everybody was using some of the same rhythms that were pre-programmed or whatever, and everything started getting very homogenized. Everything started just becoming this variation of this one thing where so many people are doing. But no, in those days, for me, the adjustment. So one of the simplest songs, Afterglow, people find it amazing. That was the most difficult transition for me.
Oh really?
Yeah, and it's become a joke now. But so basically, every time I would play it, Phil was like, "No, that's not quite the right feel." And it's like one day I finally asked him, "So Phil, what are you feeling? What are you thinking when you do this?" And he says, "Well, it's like walking, boom, bop, boom, bop." And for me, it's like I didn't say it, but it clicked in my head. It's like, oh, that's why I can't feel it. Where I grew up, we didn't walk like that. So it's like, and I guess musically, I had to take the swagger out of some of what I did. I had to take the funk out and make it really straight and linear.
Yeah.
And over the years, I think we met in the middle. He got a bit funkier, and I learned how to play straighter and all that. But yeah, that was so. And then the first 2 weeks on tour with them were the craziest, almost one of the loneliest times of my life because after the shows, we'd all be in one room together. Everybody's hanging out and talking in somebody's hotel room, and we're supposed to be speaking the same language, but I could not follow a single conversation with them all talking together. One-on-one, I was fine.
Yeah.
But we had people from the north, people from both sides of the Thames. We had the charters, the public school boys.
Yes,
we had
yes.
all of that.
Yeah.
And the man, those accents and just it was crazy. It was really difficult for me to really stay tuned into what everybody was. And everybody in the English tend to speak a lot faster than we do over in America.
Yes,
So,
I guess we do. Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, I had to. It was a big change on more than just musical levels.
Well, Seconds Out is one of the best live double albums from the era, without doubt. And I know many of my listeners and readers love that album. And one of the highlights for me personally is Los Endos. When that which is a tour de force for yourself and Phil. Was that something that you yourself enjoyed playing that as well? Was it?
Oh yeah, yeah, and yeah. That was, and the feeling of because I'd done double drumming with Zappa as well, and when it really locks in, it's a really powerful sound. And with Phil and I would lock in pretty easily. I mean, from the very first day, we just sat down and started jamming, and it immediately locked in. It was just very easy to play with him. I mean, there are parts I had to learn for the songs, of course, and so when we would do the duets and all of that, I mean, that those built over the years. But yeah, there were those times like Los Endos being one of them, where the two drum sets together live with this really powerful, moment in the song. Yeah, those are the times. I mean, those two, everybody expects me to. So many times I've done something and people want, can our friend come in and play drums because we want to do the double drum? They don't realize how many hours of practice we did to get it to that point. I mean, yeah, we naturally felt things the same way, but after the first tour with Genesis, after that they got into the whole 40-hour week rehearsal thing as well. So we would literally spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and really fine tune those parts. I mean, him and I would really play together and it got to the point where it felt very natural, and it was, but I don't think people really realize, I don't think people in general realize how much work goes into preparing a tour, with a really tight band.
They probably don't also realize, of course, that although Phil Collins was singing out front and you were playing the drums, that he also had a very keen interest in jazz, didn't he? He had Brand X. He had Brand X, which was jazz fusion.
Right. Well, as we talked, we listened to the same people growing up. He listened to all the same jazz, drummers and stuff that I did as well. Both of our favorites being Tony Williams,
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he had the other side of it was that he also listened to the Who and Zeppelin and Beatles and all that. I was listening more to James Brown and all that side of things. But what we had in common was the really studying the jazz players of the day.
Fantastic. And I know you continued playing with Phil when he went solo as well. But the other album I'd just like to touch on, because it's one of my favorites, is Beyond Appearance by Santana from 1985.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because that to me feels like it brings in all the things you were doing from Genesis, but had lots of funk and the jazz stuff from the 70s as well. Was that an album that you enjoyed playing on?
I did. I haven't heard it in ages. I need to go back and take another look at it.
It sounds wonderful.
Wow, I need to go back and hear it again. I mean, for me, the crazy part was the keyboard player, who's also Chester Thompson.
Yes.
And he was the original organist for Tower of Power and wrote some of their hits in that. And we became really good friends. We hung out all the time, and it was just crazy, because first time in the studio, the engineer would say, "We need to get sounds." Okay, Chester, play. So we'd both start playing. He says, "No, Chester Thompson." And it's like, we'd still carry on. So then it got to be, okay, Chester drums and Chester keys. Okay. And again, with him, it's like, I grew up playing with lots of old jazz organ players, which is what he grew up doing, being a jazz organ player. And so that was a very easy lock as well, playing with him and well, of course, Alphonso Johnson, who we also played together in Weather Report. And so that was an amazing time. I mean, with the three percussionists, oh man, that was wonderful.
Yeah, well, you go back and listen to it, because it sounds wonderful.
I will actually. Now that you say that, because I've not heard it in years. Wow.
Well, because I played it while I was researching this. I played it after listening to Wake Up Call, and it just and of course I've been dipping in and out of your back catalogue with the albums I've got around me, and it's part of it. So one of my last questions is, all of these things that you've done and this new album, Wake Up Call, do you feel that those influences of a part of the new recording in some way, part of your musical personality now?
Probably so. Yeah. I mean, I think everything you do, especially if you're allowed to create, it's going to be, those things are going to have a chance to come out. Whereas if I'm playing the script, if I've got a specific part to play, there'll be more of me trying to do that. Obviously, there'll be some of what I have and feel, obviously, that'll show up, but not in the same way that if I'm given free rein, to just go for it, then those influences have have a place to present themselves, I guess. You know?
Yeah. One of the things about your new album, I mean, it is jazz, as you say. It's kind of like funk prog, or it's so joyous. There's no words, but it's very uplifting. And we kind of in these dark times that we find ourselves in. It's kind of and how it was born out of the lockdown and COVID. It's very kind of positive music.
I'm going to change the light a bit because the light's changing outside. It's getting a bit darker on this end. Hopefully I don't mess it up. Is that going to work? Okay, great. Okay. All right. So if I can go there. So the other underlying theme of this album. So when that band was formed, my wife and I had just become Christians. She was the singer in that band, by the way. And so one by one, people in the band became Christians as well. And especially, and Caleb Quay especially, his was a very radical conversion because by the time I met him, he'd had some pretty rough things happen in his life. I mean, obviously we know his history and the contributions with Elton and all of that. But in later years, he went through a pretty bitter divorce, and I'll gloss over this very quickly. Apparently, his manager got involved with his wife and stole a bunch of money from him and stuff, and he was hurting. He was in a lot of pain. And brilliant player and all that. Him and I got to be really close friends. And one day, just sort of teasing him. It's like, well, hey man, it's Easter. You got to go to church with us. Come on, you got to go on Easter. It's like he said, okay, I'll go. And boy, it's like he, I guess he responded to what we call an altar call, and never ever looked back. I mean, the guy just caught fire, and all that dark cloud lifted. And Pee Wee and Michiko, they're like the most joyous people you could ever meet. I mean, we laughed. Oh my goodness, we laughed all day long in those days. It was always just fun and laughter and joy and all of that. And I feel, and that kind of came through in this thing. I'm glad you pointed that out because that's kind of where we are. I love to laugh. I mean, it's so funny. I didn't get to, okay, I'm treading on dangerous territory here. I didn't get to laugh as much with Genesis, except the last tour we did in 2007 that I did with them. To me, it was the best of all. We laughed every day, all day, every day. It was amazing. It was so much fun. I look back and I think, okay, by then we've all gotten over ourselves. Okay, so it's like, we've grown a bit and whatever our issues were back in those days no longer existed, and it was just so much fun. And and that I definitely feel like that came through on Wake Up Call. That just joy of being alive, of just
Well, that's really lovely to hear you say all of that, because I think I really do believe, and I say this a lot in a lot of my videos, that I really believe that music is the healer and the doctor for so many people on such a deep level.
Absolutely.
And this album, because it's easy to say that when an album has vocals because you follow the lyrics. So for an album to come across as being really joyous, really uplifting and positive without a word being said, it means that it's connecting, it's transferring from the musician to the listener in a very, very magical way. And that's what I feel this album does.
Great. Thank you. Well, it's funny. I'm reminded, I cannot remember who said it originally, very famous, person who was a Christian teacher. And what was said is, everyone should always preach. And if you have to, use words. So the joy and the things that you hope come across, you got to see it, But like I say, and I love instrumental music because I am free from having to try to convey lyrically. Caleb was a real true wordsmith. I mean, man, but he could whip up a lyric so fast. It was amazing. Just point him in the right direction, and he just becomes a machine. It was amazing, I don't have that gift, but I feel like you can convey moods and atmosphere. Well, look at symphonic music. Look at orchestral music.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they can take you on this beautiful, like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. It's like the most uplifting thing, and Handel's, Messiah.
Yeah.
It's like those things just lift you, but some things can be so dark. It's like when I played with Weather Report, they never talked musical terms in describing how they wanted me to play a song. I remember the first conversation with Wayne Shorter, one of the songs he had written. He looked at me and he says, "Okay, in this song, picture a caravan going across the desert." That was it. That was my direction. So I listened to the song. It's like, oh yeah, I get that. Okay, sure. And it brought out a response in me that I don't know if I would have gotten to otherwise.
That's amazing, because I recently interviewed Steve Hackett, and he described his new album as a movie for the ears.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a similar thing, isn't it? Because it's like if you're in your house and it's really dark and rainy outside, and
Absolutely.
if you put whatever you put on musically will change the atmosphere of that room. And
Right.
that's what,
Absolutely.
and your album, I mean, where I'm in the UK, we're in the dead of winter. It just turns the sun on.
Oh, wow. Well, wow. Thank you. Yep. I've spent many a winter in England, so I get it.
So the new album, it's out now, and it's on CD and vinyl, and you can get it from chesterthompson.bandcamp.com. Is that where you would like people to go?
Yeah, that would be the main place. As far as something you can have in your hand, absolutely. And the downloads, of course. I mean, it'll be on all the usual places as far as downloading and streaming.
Of course.
But to actually
buy one.
But yeah, to actually have the physical thing in your hand, yes.
Yeah, that's because
I've still got a ton of CDs, and I've got vinyl. Just bought a new cartridge, and things sound amazing. So it's
well, by having the physical item in your hands, you are closer to the artist and the creative process that brought it to you. And I think it's an important part of the story. And again, yes, you can stream it, but I think if you listen to the album, you've got the whole story, the whole flavors of of all the tracks together. So yeah, it's a great album, everybody, and it's well worth listening to. Stream it first, but then go to chesterthompson.bandcamp.com to get a copy. Are you got any? I suppose because you recorded it remotely, it's going to be very difficult, if at all possible, to do anything live with this album.
Oh, we definitely intend to. We really want to do it live. The Pee Wee and Michiko, my main cohorts in this, they are their daughter's band. When the kids were all younger, Michiko taught a lot of the musicians' kids piano lessons, including my son. And Judith was a few years behind them, so she'd be this little kid sort of tagging along, and she's turned into this monster performer. Beautiful keyboard, guitars, and her vocals are just crazy. They tour with her a lot. I just did a tour with Unitopia, and almost every place we played in Europe, there were posters announcing Judith was coming or had just been there or whatever. And so they her career has been really growing, and they've been really sort of supporting her, and so we're trying to find the time. The other thing, because Michiko overdubbed several keyboard parts, I mean, so there'd have to be at least another keyboard, probably a couple of guitars, at least one, preferably two saxophones. But so we're working on it. Hopefully we'll be able to get it set up and announced and go for it.
Well, that's fantastic, Chester. And thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. It's a wonderful album, and it's been great being able to talk to you like this. So,
well, thank you, Phil. This has been a really pleasure to speak with you, man. And again, I'm meeting, some really great people I hadn't met before in England. I'm really looking forward to us getting to sit together over a cuppa,
That'd be great. Well, take care, and hopefully we'll talk again in the future. So.
Okay, Phil, you too. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
A huge thank you to my guest, Chester Thompson, for joining me today. That was a wonderful interview, and Wake Up Call is such a joyous, positive album of music. It's all instrumental music, but it literally is like a soundtrack for your ears. It really just as I said in the interview, it feels like to me, it just turns the sun on. It's just a really wonderful music, and prog funk is what Chester called it. And which is a term that actually should exist anyway, which so much of jazz rock and jazz fusion kind of went in that direction. But there's some great albums to listen to from Chester's back catalogue. Bongo Fury by Frank Zappa is a wonderful album. The stuff with Steve Hackett as well, with Please Don't Touch, Black Market, and listen to Gibraltar from that. It's absolutely superb. And of course, Seconds Out by Genesis, one of the best live double albums ever. And Beyond Appearances by Santana is another wonderful album to dip into. But Wake Up Call is amazing. And to hear how it was put together remotely, being driven by the drum tracks first. Absolutely superb stuff. So make sure you go to chesterthompson.bandcamp to get a copy. Remember, support music by buying a physical album. You can get the CD or vinyl. But thank you so much for being here and listening and watching. Please subscribe to all of our future podcasts. Visit the Now Spinning Magazine website at nowspinning.co.uk. We're on Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and everywhere else. And of course, we've got our own private community as well for collectors to talk to each other and share music ideas. So remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Please take care, everyone. Keep spinning those discs, and I shall see you on my next episode.